Hi everyone. For our next episode of my Metroidvania series on YouTube, episode 6, I thought we would talk about something that had to do with the speedrunning side of my research, given that I had just explored those who walk away from speedrunning, a trans woman's experiences researching and abuses suffered from the speedrunning community. So we already went over this particular piece and read through it. So I just want you to know that from here, I got an idea, which was to talk about some of the abuse that I suffered from a little bit more in depth. And it's not something that I necessarily wanted to go into while writing about it, just because I sort of summarize it, because all of the abuse is either tokenized or standard issue trans bigotry. Basically, it could be tokenism, and it could be coming from different marginalized groups that we're punching down, or just from white cishet men predominantly. And so I wanted to basically talk about something that I didn't have time to really discuss in this particular piece nearly as much. I alluded to it a little bit in a footnote, but that was this particular review that I wrote. And the way that works is I actually wrote a piece before this called Postcolonialism and Doom, where I was analyzing Doom from Doom Eternal specifically through a post-colonial lens, which is to say the writings and teachings of Edward Said, who was a post-colonial critic. He wasn't, strictly speaking, a socialist, but he did write for Palestinian rights. He was a Palestinian American citizen himself, and he devoted most of his life to writing about Orientalism in the 1970s. It was a concept that he coined, and then in the early 1990s, 1993, I believe, he wrote Culture and Imperialism, where he would critique popular media through a post-colonial lens. Most famously, he did Jane Austen. So I took the same basic idea and I applied it to Doom Eternal. And there was some murmurs of discontent regarding that, because while I was critiquing Doom Eternal, I didn't really have a chance to go into it from a layperson's perspective nearly as much. And I've already read that piece. Again, that was a companion piece to Those Who Walk Away from Speedrunning, contains Postcolonialism and Doom. So I've already read that. And I thought what I would do is read this review. And this review of Doom Eternal from 2020 actually came after Postcolonialism and Doom, because Postcolonialism and Doom was something that was written by me for Marilyn Roxy in exchange for them setting up my website. And that happened right at the beginning of the year. So my website went live, I want to say my website went live in January or February of 2020. I forget the exact date. It doesn't really matter. But it occurred before I wrote this review. So Postcolonialism and Doom was in February 9th, I believe, 2020. And then this I wrote several months later on April 1st. And this had a much more negative impact than Postcolonialism and Doom, because I was writing it in a way that was meant to sort of get people's attention. It was written more like journalism, and it does talk about Judith Butler and some other people, but it's also coming from the perspective of a trans woman who was in the closet at the time, and who was also, frankly speaking, a Doom fan. I really liked Doom 2016, and up to a point, I also liked Doom Eternal, and I even had an interview series that was dedicated to interviewing speedrunners from Doom Eternal, and that was something I talked about previously in the last piece that I wrote. But this was kind of the turning point where I started to get ostracized from the Doom community specifically. And a lot of it has to do, with the title, Doom Eternal 2020 Review, No Girls or Trans People Allowed. So what I thought I would do in this video is I would read the review from top to bottom, And then I would go over the comments that I got from people and read those from top to bottom. And there's a lot of them, so the review itself will probably take me about half an hour to 45 minutes to get through. And then going through the comments will probably take me an hour to get through because there's a lot of them and I want to analyze them. And they're all kind of the same stuff, but I want to sort of go through and respond to them just because I don't know. It's actually kind of satisfying as someone who's written her PhD on Gothic poetics and reclaiming sex work through iconoclastic poetics, which includes Metroidvania, speedrunning, shooters, gaming stuff, to be able to revisit this piece because, again, I wrote it in the closet. So without further ado, I'm going to start reading this, and then we'll get to the comments themselves. And I'll give you some additional context about those when we get to them. Also, before I start, when I wrote this piece, I wrote it on April 1st, 2020, and I didn't actually realize that it was April Fool's when I wrote this. So needless to say, this was not a April Fool's joke, even though I released it on April Fool's. I literally was just in my own head space writing about Doom Eternal, and I was really, really absorbed in that particular thought process, and I just literally didn't realize, oh, it's April Fool's. And a lot of people thought that some people thought that this was a joke because of that, and that's on me, admittedly. But also, furthermore, it wasn't a joke. I was actually quite serious about what I was writing. So without further ado, here's the review itself. Doom Eternal 2020 review. No girls or trans people allowed. This review is for Doom Eternal. It covers, strictly, the game's single-player campaign, and not the game's lore or multiplayer. Update 4/1/4/2025. My focus has shifted to Metroidvania, which I've written multiple books on since this post. To it, I've decided to release the entirety of my work on Metroidvania in one single place, from master's to PhD and beyond, my entire work on Metroidvania. This includes my master's thesis and early postgraduate work, my PhD, further essays released after my postgraduate work in my larger book series. You can also ask me questions about Metroidvania on the Metroidvania subreddit, but the reason I mention that is because this is one of the pieces that I put in my entire work on Metroidvania, because it's sort of the preliminary research, because when I was researching Metroidvania at the time, I was also researching first-person shooters and survival horror. And I also divided Metroidvania into Castlevania-style Metroidvania and Metroid-style Metroidvania. So I mentioned that piece in my larger corpus of work. So that's what that update is about. Update 4/13/2021. With the release of Part 2 of the Ancient Gods, I've revisited this review, writing the introduction and adding a DLC section at the end. To hear my final updated thoughts on Doom Eternal, especially speedruns of it, check out my long read, Spectating FPS Speedruns, Potential Pitfalls Exemplified by Doom Eternal. Introduction, Gender Trouble. And for those of you who don't know, Gender Trouble is a reference to Judith Butler, whose book Gender Trouble came out in 1993, I believe, early 90s in any event. And it's something that I'll explain as we proceed. In these latter days of nostalgia mania, Doom Eternal shamelessly panders to an older audience. I don't mean that in the sense of gore and violence. I mean it's literally made for an audience that craves an older time. Not just demons and castles, though it has plenty of those, but those from the 1980s and 90s. Those decades were a time of fixed gender assignment, where men were heroes and girls were damsels in distress. Not always. Consider Ellen Ripley, but also Samus Aran, her video game counterpart. Though central in Gothic works like Alien and Metroid, these warlike phallic women weren't the industry standard, they were the exception. I'd say this standard has come home to roost in Doom Eternal. However, there are no damsels in the game. In fact, there are no women, period, save the con maker, the Whiplash, and Dr. Elena Richardson. Unfortunately, the Whiplash is neutered, having her breast removed, for marketing reasons, according to Hugo Martin, and Elena is completely off-screen. There she renounces her position as a scientist to essentialize the Slayer as a god, one whose strength is necessary for the survival of civilization. This is hardly neutral. Instead, traditional roles are reinstated through times of imaginary crisis. In Doom Eternal, the one human female character is an invisible cheerleader lusting after the protagonist while enforcing traditional gender roles. She might as well be an uneducated housewife kissing her husband on the cheek before he marches off to war. In other words, she's a trad wife who used to be a scientist and who gave up her career to be a stay-at-home mom for a male protector who, as we'll see, is basically Conan the Barbarian, which is a fascist form of pulp fiction that was written by Rob Howard at the same time period and in the same magazine as H.P. Lovecraft, another infamously fascist, incredibly racist, and sexist individual. Maybe women don't want that. Here's a pretty good example of a sexualized Doom girl, similar to how Samus Aran can be sexualized through her power suit. And the reason I mention this is just because sexuality isn't bad. It's when it panders to a specific audience while excluding other audiences that it becomes problematic, i.e. context matters. And in this particular case, this game that's just for men is a game that is largely centered around Conan the Barbarian, who's too cool for school, and he doesn't even care about sex at all. But this is something that I mentioned just extraneously. It's like sexuality is something that often exists within the larger fandom. But this game is so sexist that it puts sexuality in the bedroom. R.E. Foucault, A History of Sexuality, the bourgeoisie and its rise led to sexuality being pushed into the bedroom exclusively, so the lack of any overt sexuality in Doom Eternal was basically them doing just that. There's no room for sex in video games, just Doom Guy, even though he's very sexualized and his killing of demons is very sexualized because he's a cishet man, and the game reinforces those gender roles. Alas, in any world where men are kings, no women can apparently enjoy Doom Guy's exclusive luxury of masculine nudity or heroic power. The physical rights of the male action hero are denied to them, despite Red Sonja being a Marvel Comics Amazon staple since the early 1970s. Meanwhile, if someone like me, who loves Metroid, wanted to be Samus or some other Doom Girl alternative to the classic male hero in Doom 1, or in Doom period, I couldn't because girls are, from a traditional standpoint, heavily regulated sex objects. Attempts to adopt the same position for female characters are generally sexualized for men. There are exceptions of butch or masculine depictions of Doom Girl, but these hardly represent the norm. For more information on sexism in games, consider reading my piece, Borrowed Robes, The Role of Chosen Video Games. I'm not against sexiness nor spiritual Conan adaptations. John Milius's 1981 version is pretty great, especially the music. I'm against sexism or compulsory roles for men and women. At the very least, id could make the protagonist optionally female, but they didn't. They went out of their way to exclude women from any powerful role in-game. Except the Khan's role of archaic mother, a type of patriarchal boogeyman for the hero to slay, does preserve and maintain order. For more information on archaic mothers and powerful women in video games, consider reading my piece, War Vaginas, Phallic Women, Vaginal Spaces, and Archaic Mothers in Metroid. And also, the reason I mention this is because Doom was originally a reskin of Aliens, and Aliens was a Vietnam revenge fantasy filmed by James Cameron that was essentially presenting Hadley's Hope as Saigon. And they were getting their revenge against the colony that was overrun by the communist space bugs coming from Heinlein and Starship Troopers, and at the end, they retreat from the colony again. They won't return, and they nuke the site from orbit. So it's just genocide taken to its logical conclusion, and they abandon the space after completely destroying it. The American side, that is. And that being said, Aliens was a Vietnam revenge fantasy, and John Carmack and John Romero couldn't get the rights for Aliens, so instead they made Doom, and they put the colony on Mars. But it's the same idea. There's a colony on Mars, they lose contact, a Rambo-style Marine goes in. He's male this time, as opposed to the female version of Rambo that James Cameron wrote Ellen Ripley to be, because he was writing a sequel to Alien, and he was turning the final girl into the final victory of Ellen Ripley getting her revenge on the person who had sexually traumatized her in the first film. But he's also turning it into a neoliberal propaganda film that would go on to inspire the entire shooter genre, but also the entire Metroidvania genre. Metroid, in particular, was inspired directly by Metroid. Mother Brain, the Alien Queen, Samus, Ripley, Now, in Samus's case, she has the white Indian trope as well. It's a white Indian, white savior narrative. That's something that James Cameron leaned into in Avatar. But in Aliens, he didn't really do that quite as much because Samus doesn't have that girl raised by wolves feel. She's literally just a corporate employee with a chip on her shoulder. But these things are all connected. Doom Eternal is a colony revenge fantasy. Aliens is a colony revenge fantasy. And Metroid is a colony revenge fantasy. They're all made of the same stuff. And they're all subject to the same transphobic, sexist, and settler colonial Cartesian heteronormative forces. To grant women similar positions of power introduces a problem for developers, obviously catering to the traditional default norm. Judith Butler calls this problem gender trouble, and it's precisely what id doesn't want. Their solution is to make trans people vanish, and for women to be of a singular position, damsels with no mind of their own, or desires divorced from the Slayer's pointedly Conan the Barbarian physique. And there you go. This skin is actually a reference to Conan the Destroyer, because he doesn't have his amulet from the first movie. He has a necklace, something like a feather necklace. So again, this is literally a white Indian story, and he's decked out as a barbarian who's restoring order to the state. That's precisely the issue with Doom Eternal. It's a game for men when it doesn't need to be. Girls and queer people like metal, fantasy violence, and demons too. Case in point, I'm a trans woman, and I like all of these things. And I wasn't just trans after I came out. I wrote this when I was in the closet. So I like these things since I was a little girl. I played the original Doom on DOS in the early 90s when that game came out in 1993. So, yeah, and I played Wolfenstein 3D, and I played Doom, Hell on Earth, and I played Super Metroid, and I watched Alien, and I watched Aliens. I grew up with three brothers, and I was surrounded by young men who fought the war on terror in Iraq, and that's something that I ultimately disagreed with even when I was in high school. I just didn't fit in, but I played the same stuff, and I liked the stories, just not for exactly the same reasons. The context for me liking it and why I escaped into those worlds was ultimately different, which is why I felt excluded by id Studios. Historically, these areas have sexualized components. The lack of sexuality in Doom Eternal explains why women and trans people have been excluded. In the traditional sense, women are sex objects, and trans people don't count. They just don't exist in this game, period, except for the demons. Trans people are sex demons, and they exist on stages to be destroyed. It's the bury your gays trope. This feels like a broader, worrying trend. As a AAA title, Doom 16 felt less singular in its audience base. After Trump's first election, however, it pandered to male gamers with a Marvel-esque vision of the world, replete with traditional gender roles tied to binary images of conventional us versus them war. Is Doom Eternal explicitly political? No, but politics and popular media are seldom directly linked in America. Instead, media is sponsored by those with political views, regardless if that cash comes in from corporate or consumer pockets. And traditionalists pay for media that support their attitudes, regardless if the authors publicly state their intended audience. The content and the purchase adumbrate these ties, nonetheless. Though traditionally well-made, Doom Eternal feels like a nostalgic old boys club. Everyone's a male beefcake flexing at each other. To draw from Umberto Eco's 14 Features of Fascism, its action, specifically strength, for the sake of itself. A perpetual casus belli that grants men total power in society and abroad. This imperium regulates everyone, though, including men. The biggest regulation is that which is absent, women, trans people, and sex. With its purified 80s-style violence, Doom Eternal is masculine, bellicose, and chaste, with obligatory male butts plastered all over the place. It's not sexual, it's masculine. The original review. So this was the review that I originally wrote as of 2020. And the section that I just read about Judith Butler, I added to this piece on March or April of 2021. So this first part I wrote a year after, basically. And this is the original review. And this is what people were originally responding to before I had a chance to clarify things. Bear in mind, after I clarified things, they still were responding negatively to me. Gothic stories have existed for centuries, including inside fascist cultures. Despite its savior complex and unstoppable manly hero, is Doom Eternal Gothic? Well, sort of. In Britain, the neo-Gothic movement initially focused on the return of a romanticized past imprinted on the Catholic faith as demonized during the Reformation. By visiting hell on earth, Doom Eternal returns an older devilish religion to the mortal plane, the Hell Priests. These robed outsiders announce themselves with gaudy icons, skulls, and yawning spires. Also an outsider, the Slayer belongs to an order of medieval knights called the Sentinels. It's all highly romantic from a visual standpoint, deliberately antiquated. Also, when I hear the word Sentinel, I think of the Judas Priest song, The Sentinel. He's a guardian, and he returns from outside to defend the realm from within against a foreign internal-external plot. So it's standard issue fascist propaganda. And fascist propaganda more broadly loved American comic books and white Indian stories, go west, young man, Lebensraum, go east, young man. So this stuff is all like historically relevant to a larger anti-fascist argument, which is basically what I was doing with this review. Doom Eternal ignores many of the other ways a Gothic space can function. Its levels aren't mazes to lose yourself in, they're scenic, and have only one direction by which to move, forwards. Gaze upon torture chambers, abandoned castles, and lakes of fire. Alas, there's little fear and awe, just colorful images. Likewise, the lonesome 2016 chorus is gone, replaced with dubstep and nu metal, anathema to the thrash crowd of the 1980s. For a longtime metal fan like myself, Mick Gordon's second Doom entry feels like a solid B, but hardly a magnum opus. Nothing comes close to rivaling Rip and Tear or BFG Division. Instead, the new material works best to complement the action. I'd kill for some Bobby Prince, give me some Merciful Fate, or better yet, Aubrey Hodges. Returning to the levels, they remain visually varied, but there isn't much visual progression. The areas in Castlevania and Metroid sit inside a larger eponymous structure. Doom Eternal is all over the map. You're effectively a tourist, skipping from place to place. If it were open-ended or selected from a map screen a la Mega Man, perhaps it would have worked better, but it's not. It's just an unbroken sequence of different locales with seemingly no relation to one another, a colorful Rubik's Cube of combat. With its floating one-ups and obvious item roster, Doom Eternal feels unapologetically retro. So does its in-game cache of nerdy secrets, floppy disks, and vinyl record repressings. Unfortunately, the game's cultural attitudes are equally dated. Its target community is effectively an all-boys club, filled to capacity with men who loved Doom in the good old days. The game plays like an ultra-violent Saturday morning cartoon, worshipping the bulging bicep, not the bosom. There's no sex, and no women. I couldn't shake the feeling of a didactic series of action figures brought out of the closet for les enfants terribles to reclaim their lost childhoods. And honestly, this would be fine if that past wasn't so sexless, so ostensibly neutral and male-centric. 2020 is more than a nostalgic Pax Diorum for 90s kids. It has girls and queer people in it, and open if optional sexual preferences. None of these things exist in Doom Eternal. All we're left with is the outmoded homosocial worshipping of the Doom Marine by a largely male, white, cis-het audience, the Giga Chad admired by real men everywhere. And that particular link, if I remember correctly, leads to some YouTuber who was talking about Doom Eternal and unironically using the language Giga Chad. So this language isn't just me inserting it myself. This is how people talk about the Doom guy. He's too cool for sex, though, not when there's demon bros to kill. Devilman Crybaby, I hardly knew ye. And when I say that he's too cool for sex, he's basically a fascist Superman. Fascism relegates sex to the bedroom. It forces women to be wives for their husbands, broodmares. The difference between Pax Americana in the United States is that women, we can do it, Rosie the Riveter, whereas men went off to war, women could be factory workers. Whereas in Nazi Germany, for instance, women could only be broodmares, and there was a lot of propaganda around that. And the propaganda in Doom Eternal emulates fascist propaganda, and also fascist propagandists from the United States and Great Britain, not just Nazi Germany. So that's what I'm alluding to here, and that's why I think it's a problem. Doom Eternal is made for the Twitch crowd, a tough-as-nails game aimed squarely at the best of the best. And also, real quick, this art here is, it's a waifu, it's a girl in panties, it's campy and silly, but it's showcasing that girls and trans people and femboys and whoever else, the catboys that Nick Fuentes preys upon, wearing panties like that. You don't know what's under those panties. Could be a surprise. Could be a trap. And this is the kind of thing that they're so bigoted, at least outwardly, that they don't even want to include this kind of stuff. And there is a potential problematic element with including women, as there always is, because they can be sexualized just for men, instead of having their own voice. But Doom Eternal is trying to play it safe in such a way that also feels fascist at the same time. There can only be Conan the Barbarian, and he can only be a man, no women at all. Girls have cooties. It's a very fascist approach to things. Doom Eternal is made for the Twitch crowd, a tough-as-nails game aimed squarely at the best of the best. These exhibitions are a blast to watch. They also fill chat rooms with men obnoxiously shouting Doom. I love a good bloodbath. I just don't feel that same surge of euphoria by posturing that some obviously do. And I feel like I should. I played Doom throughout the 90s and consider myself a fan. I also think the original series wasn't nearly as overt in its singular camaraderie as Doom Eternal is. That came later. It can be exciting to know that something was lovingly made, and just for you. I just hate to feel alienated from a franchise so near and dear to my heart because of its staunchest flag wavers. This is ours. It was made for us, i.e., white, cishet men. And maybe it was. It also misses the beauty of its predecessor, Doom 2016. That game steered away from any specific persona for a wider appeal and worked better for it. Minimal but elegant, it rescued Rip and Tear from an infamously bad Doom comment, creating a badass slogan in the process. Doom Eternal mostly reneges on these innovations, valorizing the meme its precursor subverted so deftly. Maybe I'm an outsider and always was. I was, because I'm writing this in the closet. Or I was writing this in the closet, rather. My preference for Midway's PS1 port may speak to this. It's still jarring to see the sequel to a clean slate revival backtrap so abruptly tone-wise. Doom Eternal shamelessly panders to a fanbase the 2016 reboot largely ignored. Yes, the Doom community is quite real, but is there any room for an old Doom fan like myself to enjoy the same game for my own trans woman communist reasons? Yes, but not through its dated treatment of gender and sex. Apparently, that's my problem, not theirs. Doom's original tone borrowed a lot from the Evil Dead franchise, especially Evil Dead 2, a series that aptly demonstrates how the balance between humor and horror is tricky to manage. Generally in flux from title to title, the wrong blend of scares and laughs can alienate certain members of a larger fan group. Imagine my disappointment then in seeing Doom's latest reincarnation being so flippantly dumb. Yes, they included an official port for Midway's Doom 64. That feels like a hand-me-down toy on Christmas. It's the one I like, but I already own it. The game's overall presentation is largely transparent, and would have been benefited by trusting players to imagine and learn, rather than spelling out every last detail. To be generous, the story in Doom Eternal is pretty disposable, a grand space opera with debatable contributions. The game also color codes everything. Items, cracks in the walls, the traffic light signpost system. With so much visual data to work with, an obtrusive tutorial system seems superfluous. While you can turn that off, you can't disable the narrator or the multiple chatting load screens. Cut, scenes, and lore dumps are frequent, but add little more than corny jokes. See Mortally Challenged, and sanguine WWE-style schlock. The reason I mention Mortally Challenged is because they're making fun of woke culture by calling the demons mortally challenged, which is also apologizing for genocide because, in case people haven't figured it out by now, the demons are effectively not just demons. They're not just bugs. This isn't just a bug hunt like in Aliens. It's a zombie apocalypse on the home front. This is hell on earth, and all the normal humans have been replaced by communist xenomorph demons that the Slayer has to mop up so they can reclaim society from degenerate forces. And there is a regressive element that's skeptical of modernity because modern science couldn't prevent the rise of mad science and gay space bugs. So again, it's the foreign plot. And so a lot of these jokes, like something like Mortally Challenged, were things that a lot of these people would just be like, LOL, 2016 style, Trump is president, Gamergate jokes that were already tired at this point. But they put that in the game, and that's a political thing. And so it's definitely something that's not just neutral, but it's not something that I really expounded upon in the original review. The game's calling card is over-the-top ultra-violence, and it achieves this well. Doom 2016 was effectively move shoot. There was no reload. Not so with Doom Eternal. In it, you need to manage 3 key resources: health, armor, and ammo. The chainsaw reloads ammo. You'll have to use it often, every single fight. The same goes for flame belch and glory kills, but also all of your weapons. Ammo counters are precariously small and discourage weapon bias. The game is designed to be played in a very specific manner, especially in the harder difficulties. There's some wiggle room with weapon mods, traitor points, and runes. Likewise, every fight feels special. Despite following the same rules, everything occurs inside a solid, consistent combat loop. Another plus with the choices concerning charge-based moves like the chainsaw and blood punch. The latter cannot be refilled without performing 2 glory kills, and the chainsaw can be used up too much if fuel is used on the wrong demon. It pays to prioritize the right demons with the right tools at the right time, basically being a more efficient killing machine, a better cop. The game isn't just survival horror. Even on Nightmare, rebounds are possible. Just be prepared to go back to school. The learning curve is steep. While the combat in Doom Eternal is impeccable, its parallel movement schemes, combat and exploratory motion, don't mix. Platforming sections give the player something to do outside of fights. However, the game should have melded the two schools into something more cohesive. I say this because its combat movement is the core gameplay experience, and it's actually dangerous to perform, thus exciting to watch. Generally isolated, the exploratory movement is tedious and dull for everyone involved. Another complaint involves the Berserk power-up. Doom 2016 featured the Slayer, flying through enemies like a tornado and punching larger foes to pieces. In Doom Eternal, Doom Guy has 1 kill animation per foe, an oddity considering how many glory kills he can do by comparison. This includes the chainsaw. Despite this dearth of carnage, id Software removed my favorite glory kill from 2016, the belly slash for the Mancubus. His kill animations and those for the Cacademon's ill-fated eyeball are far too repetitive. The boss fights are frequent and varied, however the late-game additions to Doomguy's arsenal overpower them. Given the obvious strength of the Crucible, I would have to put it behind the Slayergate paywall and cut the Unmaker from the game. Giving the player a bad ending option by defeating the final boss without it would have been cool, too. I also think the Crucible should have been powered by killing demons instead of ammo placed around the map. There's way too much of it, considering how strong the weapon is. Sure, it doesn't kill trash, but does it need to? Behead the Baron and his cronies scatter pretty fast. Cleaving through super heavy demons also cuts the dance short. This may be to encourage speedier endgame fights, but also from a design standpoint feels a bit checkered. In-game, I'm torn between watching the Slayer kill enemies or speedrun. These are two very different schools of thought, and should be cooperating instead of competing with each other for the player's attention, which I read about here. I can't help but feel that id Software is juggling. It does a good enough job, but the two areas are suddenly at odds. The guns in Doom Eternal are beefy and loud. However, I wanted to feel in awe, even afraid, when firing a hell-forged rocket launcher. Instead, I remembered I Am Ninja's warning to would-be weapon buyers. Sure, it says, forged in the belly of a puka werewolf. Doom 2016's arsenal was sleek, legit, the sort of futuristic company like the UIC might actually use. Doom Eternal's stockpile is somewhat cartoonish and toy-like. So basically what's happening here is Doom 26 arsenal was literally taken from the company itself. These were corporate weapons, they weren't toys. And he was using them the same way that the Viet Cong, the demons, the zombies, the whatever, were using against the company. But Doom Guy is stealing from the UAC to use the company's weapons against the company's enemies, to basically destroy just the company's enemies. Like, he has conversations with Dr. Hayden, but he never actually challenges him in any meaningful way. By comparison, Doom Eternal's weapons are literally Nazi Wunderwaffe, sold to Wunderkind. So this is another fascist component. These are toy-like, and they're sold to children. They're indoctrination. This is dogma. It might be dead dogma to a certain extent, but it was becoming alive again after Gamergate and Trump was elected. They had already made Doom 2016, and that game was in development before Trump was elected president. Doom Eternal, however, was made after Gamergate and Trump being elected president, and that game is much more fascist in its propaganda. It's literally propaganda against demons during a zombie apocalypse with demons. And if you ever read I Am Legend by Richard Matheson in 1954, it's combining vampires or just the vampire idea. Oh no, there are just suddenly vampires everywhere, and treating them like a zombie apocalypse. Whereas Doom Eternal is doing the same idea, but it's a demon invasion, but it's instead of hordes of zombies, it's hordes of demons. And there's one Conan the Barbarian who's fighting for civilization while rejecting modernity and putting women back into the kitchen. Make me a sandwich, wife. Keep them barefoot and pregnant. That's exactly what this game is doing. Remember the ultimate demon from Doom 2016? How he sounded like the Cookie Monster? In Doom Eternal, everything sits in his shadow, pandering to players who couldn't care less about gravitas. I found myself remembering the mysterious old man's casus belli from 2016. Brutal, without mercy, but you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done. Wouldn't a full campaign of that be cool? No such luck. The combat in Doom Eternal is exhilarating. Attached to something substantial and tremendous, it could have been magnificent, too. Instead, it's kind of dorky, which fascism is, by the way. Reinhard Heydrich, the man with the iron heart, got his job through, I think it was Goebbels, or was it Goebbels who hired him? I'm trying to remember. It was the Nazi minister of propaganda who hired Reinhard Heydrich, the man with the iron heart, because they liked the same pulpy American stories. They basically both read the same comic books. And if this happened later, they would have read, or they would have watched the same movies or played the same video games. So it's the same exact fascist kind of thing, and history is repeating itself in between fiction and nonfiction. The monster design isn't terrible. However, 2016 wore uncanny on its sleeve. Here, the Mancupi aren't cyclopean, the Hell Knights have eyes, the Cacodemons have pupils, the possessed have normal faces, and so on. They're also strangely expressive, sounding almost human-like at times, less H.R. Giger, and more Don Even Puchatz, who was the author of, or the illustrator for the original Doom cover art in 1993. Doom Eternal is effectively a game of puzzles, the monsters and the ammo you kill them with, but it's more complex than it sounds. Generally easy, the classic games are hard when played as fast as possible. Doom Eternal is tough by default. It will be harder still if the combat cannot be skipped by speedrunners trying to go fast. I love how Doom Eternal caters to Twitch speedrunners. No matter how a game is designed, a speedrunner can find ways to break the rules. Some categories will still require a healthy dose of combat, hopefully. So any percent versus 100%, basically. Is the game perfect? No. Is it fun? Sure. Doom guys like the Predator, not just in appearance, nor how Mick Gordon rips off Alan Silvestri, but in how the Slayer skins his enemies alive. Not only is the Gorehound in me pleased, it is another strategic layer to the game. When the game is stripped of its own cartoonishly big muscles, we're left with a cleverly designed skeleton. It holds up rather well. What doesn't hold up so well is the made-for-boys attitude, the Marvel-style endgame that will keep sexist, toy-hungry comic book nerds coming back for thirds. Consumers can buy whatever they want. The problem is, Doom Eternal ignores demons, and video game violence is a realm for everyone, especially women and queer people. In Doom Eternal, they simply don't exist. So, just keep in mind that my review is a combination of positive and negative things, that there will be certain things that my critics respond to mostly, which is being called out for the game's sexist, transphobic views, but also theirs, by saying, in opposition to my statements, actually, and then sort of downplaying all of that, or even token trans people for that matter. So just something to keep in mind when we get to the comments. There's a little section here that I wrote on the DLC real quick. This new section comments on the game's DLC. The Ancient Gods Part 1, or Tag 1, deserves special praise. The level design is more claustrophobic. More hallways and ceilings mean the player cannot fly around like Superman to quite the same degree, and the increased monster count all but requires the player to use AoE attacks. Some of the visual hang-ups remain, but the music is more forceful and heavy. Tag 1 is also more difficult and balanced. Correction, it was, until id decided to nerf the DLC 5 months after it came out. Unfortunately, Tag 2 frequently reverts to flat, empty platforming sections and wide-open battlefields. There's nothing to jump on, just these floating objects the player can use to meat-hook into the sky with. It's the epitome of cheap, lazy level design. The entire budget focused on pretty visuals. These areas feel strangely empty at times, the kill boxes themselves having the lion's share of prey, even though these feel wrought from rude, interchangeable parts. Platforms, jump pads, and monkey bars. It makes the recent maps by John Romero and Sigel seem Byzantine by comparison. To be fair, his work in that Megawad was incredible. On a bittersweet note, the player in Part 2 no longer has the Crucible. As a result, this fight with two tyrants becomes a bit more challenging and mobile. The player can't simply kill them with a mouse click. Instead, they must jump and platform while avoiding the tyrant's attacks. The whole game should feel like this. It's not, granting the escalation encounters an oasis-like feel drip-fed when it should be full blast. Worse, the hammer has its own design flaws, stunning groups of demons outright and showering the player with maximum resources for minimal effort. Simply put, the hammer's totally busted. This and other nerfs have split the community in two. Casuals love it, so-called elitists hate it. Such factions appearing in Doom Eternal's community discourse reflects an unfortunate trend in the game's live service model. The game was arguably unfinished at launch, but the live service approach to the DLC means it can be swayed by public opinion. Who do they appeal to? A continuous stream of one-time casual players, or a small, more dedicated base of hardcore players who want to play the game more than once? I think the community response speaks for itself. Players are attacking each other en masse, with words like toxic being applied to other consumers instead of criticizing those in power. Id studios, but especially Bethesda and Microsoft. These kinds of AAA clusterfucks are generally the fault of the publisher trying to push their content creators around. I certainly don't want to go after id, since they obviously made a hard-as-fuck game right out of the gate, and Bethesda and Microsoft have been dumbing it down ever since. The situation sucks because id is beholden to their bosses, who change fairly often. First, id butters up the hardcore players in October 2022 with Tag 1, pissing off casuals. Then Bethesda is purchased by Microsoft in March 2021. A couple weeks later, Tag 2 debuts, but id nerfs Tag 1. Ostensibly, the company can't make up their mind and are trying to please everyone. In reality, I think larger forces are calling the shots. These decisions are generating some pretty serious waves in the Doom community. So great is the tension that Under the Mail felt compelled to take down his own review of the game, despite critiquing it openly and honestly. This is completely absurd. I feel that id, whether intentionally or by accident, have divided their own fanbase, alienated critics, and papered over speedrunners. Actually, I feel like id have deliberately patched the game to make things harder for speedrunners, despite speedrunners not affecting how casual people play their product. All id would have to do is wait until they had a solution that pleases both sides, instead of appealing to one side on the other, then the other by constantly rushing things. They don't, and the end result is strife, the two groups more easily put to heel by pitting them against each other. Casual players are catered to, and hardcore players are left with a promise. We'll make you single master levels. The quiet part of that promise is, we'll make them one at a time. Seems like a kind of minimalist concession when fans can already make master levels themselves, and those made by id are notoriously infrequent and buggy. This kind of oscillation in live service approach seriously hobble the larger game's raw content. In particular, Tag 2 signals a return of the empty platforming sections from the base game. This platforming sequence, for example, has no monsters at all, just a basic puzzle to solve and some standard fare AAA fantasy visuals. The common argument is that areas like these add variety from the monster combat, but it just feels empty and tacked on. All in all, Tag 1 and Tag 2 suffer the same issues seen in the base game, the ones mentioned above, but especially starter areas meant to acclimate casual players instead of shoving players in head first. To this, my partner made an interesting point. Casual games don't need tutorials. I want to sit down, play the game for a bit, and then leave. Super Mario Bros. Is a successful example, encouraging casual play that anyone can do, all without a single tutorial. Pick up the game and play it on your home entertainment system. In 1985, this concept single-handedly revitalized the international gaming market, following 83's video game crash. Whether or not the player needs the tutorials in Doom Eternal is beside the point. They're still there, and the player must play through them no matter their skill level. Then, after 4 to 5 levels, the base game gives you the meat hook, which completely changes the way the game plays. So why not just start with it instead of wasting time? This issue is compounded in the DLC, whose filler early portions deny players the very things they want from the DLC: new monsters, combat mechanics, and items. I wouldn't be so critical if the DLC were free, but it's not. You buy the deluxe edition or the season pass. In other words, you pay extra money above the cost of the base game, and you get the DLC. It's not free at all, and it doesn't improve my issues with Doom Eternal. Even if it did, those fixes only exist inside the DLC, not the main campaign. It feels gated, hiding the best aspects of what Doom Eternal could be behind paywalls, but also pay spaces, little unsatisfying VP rooms where the real fun happens. I really dislike how the DLC straight up panders to a single group, casual players. According to id themselves, they have to make DLC that newcomers will play. Translation, they're using the DLC to cater to a larger and more lucrative group. Unfortunately, they've done this by making Nightmare Mode so easy it's not fun for hardcore players. Odd, considering they targeted the hardcore player base through an arduous base campaign. Granted, said campaign front-loads the player with far too many obstacles and not enough gear. I don't want to give id too much credit there, because Cultist Base remains the hardest level in the base campaign a year later. Even so, the DLC is just all around too easy. Has id ever played Dark Souls or Bloodborne, with the hidden bosses and optional content being far harder than anything in the base campaign. Until Tag 2, the DLC felt short but sweet. Now the whole DLC program feels tone-deaf, but also rushed, formulaic, and lazy. Stranger still, many who play it swallow their criticism, aiming for solidarity within the fandom while venerating id and all of its problematic elements. For me, that feels far less important than Doom Eternal successfully appealing to multiple groups as an FPS product. Historically, id have a pretty good track record in this respect, aside from Doom 3, I suppose, but I like that game. Though far from perfect, even the base game in Doom Eternal offers a demonstrable challenge and nightmare. Why take that away in the DLC? So just keep in mind that, again, a lot of what I was saying, where it was originally a review for the game, I talk about how the game is Gothic, I talk about what I like about the game from a game design standpoint. Excuse me. And also, I talk about what I don't like. I talk about the DLC. I talk about corporate drama. I talk about Mick Gordon and the music a little bit. Not as much. I read about that more in a different campaign. But there's all kinds of different things that I'm talking about. And I don't even, and I mentioned that, yes, there's women and trans people don't exist in Doom Eternal because they don't. And the one person of color that you get in the game, from what I recall, is the little office tech bro that's helping you navigate the campaign in the Ancient Gods Part 1 and Part 2. But he's literally the help. So that's important. It's like, don't worry, you get to be the usual black slave, and hey, women, don't worry, you get to regress to a time when you were a housewife. You don't have to be a scientist, just worship me, stroke my ego. It's very like, there's this concept called passport bros that I heard about recently. It kind of reminds me of that. But the point is that this review had a lot of different criticism. And the criticism about like gender trouble and Judith Butler, admittedly, I went in a year later and inserted some of that stuff because I was responding to criticism from the game fans besides myself, and I was trying to make this more balanced and explain some stuff, and it didn't matter. They just didn't agree with me in bad faith, and they were fixated on that one thing, which is no girls and trans people allowed. And the bulk of the comments that I was getting from 2021 to 2024, I got comments for years. And before we start reading these real quick, I just want to say that I had people following me because I had a Safe for Work Twitter account where I used to promote stuff and write about video games. And I have a not Safe for Work account, which I'm on primarily now because my work transitioned into sex work. I do sex work. I came out of the closet. My PhD is about liberating sex work through Gothic poetics, including video games and ludology. So I combine Marxism, Gothic poetics, gender studies, and game theory. So ludo-Gothic BDSM. And even at this point, my name is Nick Vanderwaard, and I'm a Gothic ludologist. I primarily write reviews, Gothic analyses, and interviews. So I hadn't come out of the closet yet when I wrote this, but I was promoting myself, and even like my Discord, it still had that number thing that they got rid of eventually. So I wrote this originally, and it's like, okay, I was a Gothic ludologist, and I was being attacked for this review for being a trans woman in the closet, basically, and that made me come out, as I explained. And I wasn't just getting chased from Twitter account to Twitter account, or people would go on my YouTube account, or they would follow me anywhere where I posted stuff. I also had someone who came from that community who was trans, who said that they felt bad about what I did, and we met, and my partner was originally a partner of theirs, and then what ended up happening is they were actually reaching out in bad faith. I hooked up with their partner, and then they broke up with their partner because they were trying to, it's a long story, but basically they were housing challenged themselves, and they were basically using our partner at the time for sex and money and various things like that. And it was a giant mess. And I told them, like, look, don't just do this. Like, you need to have something to offer, so on and so forth. You can't just expect someone to carry you. You have to offer something. and you'll be taking them out of a situation where they're relatively secure and putting them in a tight spot, and it won't work out for either of you. So I was trying to get them good advice, and then they basically went mask off and attacked me. So I was getting attacked. Some of my fiercest critics from like 2020 to 2021 and onwards, and this happened with this person in 2023 and 2024, this trans person, I was getting attacked and dogpiled by sex workers, and I was getting attacked and dogpiled by shooter fans who were straight or trans a lot of the time. Some of my fiercest critics and some of the people who did the most fucked up shit were actually token trans people. But some of the most outspoken straight people who critiqued me were from the comments that came next. So now we're going to read that. And I'm going to just go through these and I'll read them like I read the review, and then I'll critique them. So we have 2021. This comment has been removed by a blog administrator. So basically what happened is I was having people come out and attack me. So my friend Marilyn Roxy was like, well, you should delete those, and don't give them any credence, that kind of thing. So I started deleting them, but there were so many of them early on. And this happened, so June 2nd, a day after my birthday, people were responding negatively. And it happened basically around the time that I wrote my extension to Doom Eternal, and I had a fallout with the speedrunning community of people. And right around the time that happened, I started getting bullied. And these are the people who are bullying me. So right after my birthday, 2021, all the way until October 2nd, 2021, I had deleted those comments. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to stop deleting those. And this was right after the release of the Ancient Gods Part 2, I believe, because that was released in October, I think. Could be wrong exactly about the date. And then someone said, did nobody notice the date? And they're referencing the April Fool's thing. And it wasn't actually an April Fool's joke. I was just a dummy, and I released the post on April Fool's. But the thing is that a lot of these comments are actually from people who didn't think I was joking. Hackerman, October 28th, 2021. The fact that every single comment needed to be removed speaks volumes of the validity of this guy's opinion. How? Because the writer only wants to hear their opinion, and everyone else's opinion is wrong. And so I deleted another comment from Rex Lancer. I don't know who that is. But then Hackerman, Doom Eternal review, no girls or trans people allowed. Clownface, as someone who is actually transgender, so this is our first token trans person, I can confirm that I don't care that there's no trans stuff in Doom Eternal. The whole point of the game is to kill demons and have fun. Besides, you only get to see other human characters for about 1% of the entire game. Who cares what any of their genders or sexualities are? They're all just background characters anyways. Except for maybe the intern, but really, who the fuck cares what his deal is? Oh, I just want to blow shit up. Okay, so you want to pilot a straight Superman, and you want all trans people and all women to be relegated to the periphery and be side characters whose only purpose is to be talking heads that venerate or assist in the hero's monomythic quest. You're such a fucking stick in the mud, And I'm transgender too. By the way, I was transgender when I wrote this, March 15th, 2020. It was only a couple of months later that I would come out of the closet. So I was already on my way out of the closet at this point. And when this person responded to me, like I had already been really badly abused by someone I was dating who is gender fluid, and I was being abused by trans people pretty severely. So by August 2022, I actually came out on my birthday, so June 1st, 2022. And then on August 7th, 2022, I came out and dedicated my work to sex pests. So this person who's critiquing me, who's actually transgender, I'm transgender too, asshole. Unknown, October 28th, 2021. Tom had never heard such bullshit before. January 18th, 2023. So someone responded to this comment over 2 years later, Tom sounds like an idiot, lol. And then Young Swag, this is what you got out of the game, November 2nd, 2021. Do you have brain rot from being chronically online? Says people responding to me online, like I don't get it. LMAO, stay mad, November 10th, 2021. December 25th, 2021. It's okay to be garbage in a game. Just don't make a clown out of yourself on the internet. The Doomslayer is the literal definition of masculinity in video games, and I doubt someone like you would change that. Like, the thing is I don't think that it's necessarily wrong to have himbos or herbos or Amazons or knights in shining armor or Arnold Schwarzenegger's the T-800 in a game. It's just, if it's literally, you're just pandering a big AAA title with all of these dog whistles and obscurantism and Darvo in it to a specific group of white fascist gaming nerds, then yeah, that's a problem. And that's something that I would like to change by raising awareness. And that was the whole point. And I was also trying to write a review of the game. I talked about other stuff and I explained my points. I talked about the DLC and I talked about it as a Doom fan. And none of that matters because the moment I disagreed with their deeply held fear and dogma beliefs, it was us versus them. And I was the demon for them to punch down against. It was Gamergate all over again. And this included tokenized trans people and women who reached out to me, cis or trans. Lesser Mook, that's precisely the issue with Doom Eternal. It's a game for men when it doesn't need to be. What it sounds like to me is that some of the people feel that women should be essential in everything, are just intimidated by the fact that the game worked so well without a major female presence. Check. Now here are the operative questions. Why shouldn't it be just for men? So since I responded to this originally, but I'll say that, like, you can have games just for men, but it's like me as a Doom fan who's a trans woman, it's like I don't want it to be just for white, straight, cishet men. I want to be included in the game, and I don't want to just be either a token demon for someone to punch, like the Whiplash or the Con Maker, but I actually want to be someone who is like, I want to be the hero, and I want to punch Nazis. I want to punch white, straight, cishet assholes. I want to punch TERFs. Why don't I get to do that? So that's why it shouldn't be just for men. I want to have power fantasies too. So it's okay if you get to punch down, but if I want to punch up at the status quo, which is what fascism is, capital defending itself when it decays, apparently that's the only thing that's acceptable for this person. And these questions are asked in bad faith, by the way. Would it be a problem if it was just for women? No, I think, but how often does that happen? But I would say that it would depend on how it was just for women, because you can have a story with Wonder Woman and she's a token cop and she's punching down against Medusa. That would be a problem. So likely answer, yeah, it's entirely possible for there to be a token power fantasy, or Ellen Ripley is just shooting monsters, space pirates, demons. What do you think Metroid is? And that game is mostly played by cishet men. Girls can play it. Trans people like me can spend their entire adult academic careers researching it, writing their PhD about it, and 4 other books besides, going on 5. So 6 books total, including years of research. And I can still appreciate Metroid. It's possible, Anita Sarkeesian, to enjoy something and critique it. So this is the classic Gamergate problem. Number 3, why can't men have anything nice without women being an inevitable issue regarding whatever it is we happen to like at that time? Because you're fascist. 4, alternatively, why aren't men allowed to enjoy something without it being attacked because women aren't involved? Oh no, am I attacking your precious little community and infiltrating it? Are women coming out of the kitchen and wanting to be heroic in ways that subvert the monomyth? Oh no. Number 5, and why is it whenever women have franchises directed to them and made specifically for them, from novels to shoujo to movies, men are trying to say it's just for girls, but doesn't need to be? Well, because those are classically divisive in a heteronormative, binarized way. And men look at that and be like, yeah, you should play Barbie, or something like that. But also, by the way, there are plenty of men who love Sailor Moon. They just don't like it for the same reason that women or queer people do. One of the most popular manga and anime of all time, and it's super fucking gay, but then you have a bunch of straight guys who are literally fetishizing the teenage girls in the show. They're looking at them and saying, ooh, woo, that's my waifu. And that's a problem in Japanese culture and pedophilia, but it's also a problem in Western American culture. It's a neoliberal issue. We'll get to that later. Hell, even the two Who Project games are majorly just female characters, not 100%. And I'm not mistaken, the brunt of the fan base are men. Yes, they are. And that's like a thing where they're consuming them for sexist reasons. A lot of straight male white guys who enjoy Sailor Moon or people of color anime fans also, as it just so happens, like a Hego or Moe or other problematic anime. Lolly? Hello? And they're men. Just because they like something, why do they like it? What's the context? Like, they're liking it for a sexist reason. Also, what's stopping women or whatever other group from enjoying the Doom games anyway? Nothing. Well, yeah, but I'd still like to see more of a presence, something subversive, because to include us at all in a way where we're not demons or the help, step and fetch it's for the straight cishet male fascist monomyth central character, the protagonist, to make him look better and to worship him like Elena Richardson does and worships him as a god. Like, she puts aside her own agency and autonomy to suck his dick. And it's like, no, okay, if I want to like a himbo, or I like Amazons and catboys and femboys and things like that, then that's fine. But this game is literally excluding all of that to pander exclusively to cishet men. And there's just nothing in the game that I'm into, like in terms of sexually or even like through power fantasies. I'm not the biggest fan of Conan. Okay, I like the movies a little bit, and you know, just the character and Frazetta's art to a certain point, though he's fascist too. And I can critique all of that and still kind of enjoy it. But, you know, maybe if Elena Richardson gets the thirst over Doom Guy, what if I want an Amazon to feel thirsty about? Someone like, I don't know, the protagonist from Rings of Power, Galadriel, when she's younger and she's riding around in her plate mail and she's on her horse and exciting. You know, or that scene where she's in her dress and it's all wet and you can see through it. And like, yeah, give me a little sex, you know. But again, there's no sex, there's no trans people, there's nothing. And it's all tokenized if it does exist. I rarely see any dude writing essays complaining about the lack of positive, traditionally masculine, powerful roles for males in Madoka Magica, My Little Pony, Powerpuff Girls, Steven Universe, etc. And that's made for girls who are tailored more towards a feminine perspective, and that's fine. Well, yeah, but then they're just burying their heads in their sand, so they don't have anything to say, and I think that's part of the problem. They're not being good allies. And they don't have to necessarily put their foot in it, because they might not have anything useful to say, but it's just like, cishet guys can like My Little Pony, or Madoka Magica, or Powerpuff Girls, Steven Universe. I grew up watching Powerpuff Girls. I saw the pilot in 1996. Steven Universe, plenty of cishet people like that show. It's not just the feminine perspective. That show's very Star Wars. Like, it's full of violence. And a lot of trans people do like it. Golems changing their gender, color-coded, you know, there's all kinds of stuff like that. But just because guys are keeping quiet and they're like, oh, well, I know my place, I stay in my lane, doesn't make them good allies. The difference is, if the female-centric media is just as good, the average cat can watch it too, or we just don't. It's that simple. Yeah, and you can critique it. Stuff like that isn't above criticism. Steven Universe isn't above criticism. Powerpuff Girls or My Little Pony aren't above criticism. The bronies and their whole community and fetishizing that to an unrealistic degree. The difference is, in Doom, they're fetishizing violence, action for its own sake, as sexualized, the heroic cult of death. You could go through every 14 of Umberto Eco's points on fascism, and every one of those applies to Doom Eternal and its fan base. This isn't a coincidence, and those were begot out of, you know, in the 21st century, from the 20th century, and specifically from Gamergate into 2016, into Trump's presidency, and developing Doom Eternal, which was developed over the entirety of Trump's first year and into COVID. So it's like, yeah, it's like these things need to be critiqued, and people who keep quiet, silence is genocide. So you need to speak out. And if you don't, and I'm just a cishet guy and I don't say anything, gee, I wonder why. Because it doesn't apply to you. Because the system is designed to benefit you. All right. But anything for men, women have to be force jammed into the ether, whether women are like it or not, or when they are involved. It's still a problem when the female character is, God forbid, attractive in any way. I never said it wasn't a problem. Give me slutty people, that image of the girl in the panties shooting the demon in the face. Yeah, give me that. Also, why are you virtue signaling and white knighting for women? Oh, does my lady want to be mentioned or not? And it's like, fuck you. We have our own opinions. When in reality, women en masse aren't complaining about Doom Eternal. I am, because I'm a woman. Never have. Yes, me, moi, and other women who play Doom Eternal, if they keep quiet, maybe gaslight gatekeep girl boss, where they keep their head down because assholes like you show up and are like, actually. And the people speaking on behalf of women for some reason think women shouldn't be seen as this as a problem when they don't. Like, I'm a woman and I'm speaking for women. Trans women are women. I'm speaking for my own kind. Okay, and basically what you're saying, you're being transphobic here, is that I'm not a real woman. And you could say, oh, well, I didn't know that you were trans. Well, I was in the closet and I wasn't out and out saying it, but you were still being transphobic towards me. Well, all I know is that if we got a Wonder Woman game that played exactly like Gears of War 3, where all the enemies were sirens, witches, and other goddesses, no males, basically a third-person Two-Who project, but it was a good game, good plot, good gameplay, good soundtrack, badass Wonder Woman. It's basically God of War at that point. Male or no male characters involved would play the shit out of the game. That you, being white cishet male men, you're basically describing the plot to Metroid, which is, again, you're playing a token Amazon for traditionally male power fantasies. And if you go all the way back to ancient Athens, the power fantasy of the Amazon was something that you would punch down against unless you could subjugate them. Hippolyta was subjugated by Theseus and married. And then those fantasies, which were originally the Amazonian power fantasies, which were subverted by William Marston, who thought that women would rule the world, by the way. And he wasn't quite there yet. He was still a little bit sexist, but he was a guy who lived in a polycule. He also invented the polygraph test, but, later disowned it. But he was someone who, believed that he subverted the Amazon myth, and Wonder Woman was about that, and it's about BDSM and all these other things. But who do you think largely consumes that stuff? A lot of his audience are cis, het, white men. And that's not to say that women can't like it, but they're only allowed to like it in the eyes of white cis het men if they don't critique it. And they overlook all of the queer history and the subversion of the original Amazonian myth. What do you think Metroid is? That's taking William Marston's Amazon in outer space and making that something that is, once again, slowly put into the closet. You're allowed to be an Amazon if you fight for the Galactic Federation and you punch down against Mother Brain. And if you're on a leash, it's subjugation. It's assimilation. That's a problem. So yeah, if like you're like, oh well, if we got what we wanted and we got Samus Aran, the Wonder Woman, running around in her underwear, fighting the Medusa, literally antagonizing nature as monstrous feminine to attack it for profit, then you wouldn't have a problem with it? You don't say. Either play the fucking game or don't. It's okay for men to enjoy something, and it's okay for women to enjoy something. Okay, but is it okay for us to critique things? Because basically you're dogmatizing things. You're saying this is canon, we're not allowed to critique it. As it's acceptable for society for women to be pandered to constantly across all media, even if that media was originally for boys. But women can critique that. Anyone can critique that, is my point. Then it's okay for men to be pandered to as well. No, it's not, actually. See, you're like, well, if women get pandered to, yes, and you're right. Gaslight Gatekeep Girl Boss Ellen Ripley is a character that pandered to second wave feminists. As it just so happens, are TERFs. And that can also apply to token trans people. And I studied that for a long time, and I grew up on that stuff. And I wasn't just a fan of Doom, I was also a fan of Aliens. And everything that came after that, from Dune to Metroid and anything else, StarCraft, and various other games that borrowed that Starship Troopers for the 1980s approach that James Cameron pioneered. It's like, yeah, it's like we need to critique this stuff. And you're saying, no, we don't. And I'm saying, you're stupid and wrong. But I replied at the time much more succinctly, February 2024, February 24, 2022. I'm not sure this is in good faith. And at this point, I had just been dumped by my ex who was abusing me, and I was actually somewhere else at the time. And so I was in a relationship rebounding with a new partner, and I was starting to come out as trans at this point. The status quo isn't simply catering to men and women, it's enforcing the status quo position, or a white cishet male, as universal. This includes all of the problematic elements said position tacitly or explicitly promotes, outright sexism, racism, and transphobia, but also whitewashing, dog whistles, and minority erasure by flooding the market with material for men. If women like it, that's okay, but they're not allowed to critique it, because the moment they do, case in point, we get dogpiled. And we get dogpiled by token trans people, too. And just token anyone, period. I'm viewed as the enemy and punched down against more aggressively by assimilated token cops than I am white people. White, straight, cishet men, specifically. But white, straight, cishet men were still attacking me and turning a blind eye while I was getting dogpiled. This includes all of the problematic elements said position tacitly or explicitly promotes, outright sexism, racism, and transphobia, but also whitewashing and minority erasure by flooding the market with material for men. If both sides were being equally catered to, this lopsided treatment wouldn't exist, but it does. Women, be they assigned at birth or trans, do not get an equal shake and share as men do. The video game is something used to reinforce gender norms for decades, is in full effect with Doom Eternal, and the game at its core represents that standard in a disturbingly pure way. It's literally purity, and what's happening to me is a witch hunt. It's blood libel. It's sodomy argumentation. Where are the women, the trans people, the persons of color? They simply don't exist. Or I would add, they exist in such a way to uphold the power and hegemony of men. It's very Cartesian, it's very secular colonial, it's very cishet. Doom Guy's a passport bro, and he's colonizing his own world. Fascism is when imperialism comes home to empire. March 3rd, 2020, read the reply again, then think about what you wrote. March 11th, Nick, you are complaining about a game, Killing Demons to Save Humanity, doesn't have women, trans people, or persons of color. Dude, we are playing the game in the areas that have already fallen to hordes of demons, and you expect people to survive? Yeah, because there are survivors. Watch The Terminator. People live in the ruins and are surviving. It's not just Doom Guy. He's liberating a territory to repopulate the earth, so there must be some survivors. Have you ever seen any post-apocalyptic fiction ever? E.g., The Road by Cormac McCarthy or The Last of Us. There are survivors. It's not just zombies and cops. It's cops and victims. Okay, some of those victims that they're killing, guess what? Aren't white cishet people. Wow. It's Red Scare, it's Yellow Menace, it's Black Revenge, any kind of moral panic that you could think of. It all goes into the same persecution networks in a time of crisis. And Doom Guy is whitewashing all of that in favor of, it's just comics, bro. But also, if you critique them, we'll fight you to the death. But they have a problem with what I'm saying. But apparently they're allowed to voice their opinions all they want because white male fragility and privilege. Then that extends to man-box thinking and any token group. Bro, this Nick guy's full of shit. Like, Doomslayer is basically the only human character in the game, and you don't get to know the gender of the few NPCs that you meet while playing. Yeah, I guess he's technically correct. They don't say, hi, my pronouns are. And every other moving entity is a damn demon. So they're just bugs. They're not human. Except this is a game, where did all these demons come from? Hell came to Earth and turned people into demons. They literally have zombies in the game. Zombie marines. Cybernetic organisms that have been experimented on, like the Terminator. These are infiltrations. It's literally a foreign plot. The Doom Slayer was created as a white male, but it could have been a black female, but then the trans would have still gone absolutely mad. No. And like, there is marginalized bigotry and marginalized infighting, absolutely. But no, that wouldn't have bothered me. Now, is it possible for there to be token black people? Yes, and then I would have critiqued that as such. Like, oh, I don't know, Darth Vader in Star Wars is literally a black Nazi, and the actor who played the black Nazi in The Mandalorian, whose character's name I can't remember either, but again, literally a black Nazi, which is a nod to James Earl Jones. Yeah, I'm going to critique that. I'm going to critique the black Nazi character from Castlevania Nocturne. Druga, or whatever her name is, she's a black Nazi, a step and fetch it for the evil red-headed girl boss from ancient Egypt or whatever. And, like, so yeah, I'm going to critique that shit. XGN, Insidious, Perseus, Nick, one thing I would like to mention, the fact that women and people of color do exist. So this is June 22nd, 2022. This is right before I started writing my book series. This is actually a month because I started writing my book series on July 22nd, 2022. So 1 month before I started writing this person says, I would like to mention is the fact that women and people of color do exist in Doom Eternal. However, the entire point of Doom Eternal is to kill demons. No, seriously, that's it. So again, it's just the bug argument. It's just a bug hunt. There's no allegory, even though James Cameron was very open about the fact that Aliens was a Vietnam War allegory. And people like this are trying to whitewash that and say, that no, actually, really, it's just about killing demons. Pay no attention to the fact that Doom was a reskin of Aliens. So the same allegory is still there, but it's being applied to our own space and time. To people like me, if I speak out about this kind of stuff, the same thing happens to me that happened to people who protested the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement. All that shit was going on at the same time. The free love movement. It's like people who stuck out got hammered by the state for racist, sexist, and yes, transphobic reasons, because by that point, 1965 onwards, the word transgender existed. It was being used, and people were growing increasingly aware of it. And by 1968, 1969, the Tet Offensive, and then the 1970s, Rocky Horror Picture Show, that came out in 1974, right around the fall of Saigon, as opposed to the Tet Offensive. So yeah, these things, history repeats itself, and we need to pay attention to that. I'm not going to read all this because this asshole decided to, I'm being gaslit by someone who basically sends a giant wall of text. There's no paragraphs, there's no indentation, nothing. So I'm not reading that. Rat, August 17th, 2020. Clearly Nick doesn't know what he is talking about. 3 of the girls are sex toys images are fan art and shouldn't be taken as in-game models, even though they're used with the in-game models that are modified. I'm also a writer, and Nick just seems like he's bitching about things that don't fucking matter. So I'm being misgendered because at this point, August 17th, 2022, I had come out as trans. So from this point forward, I am being viewed as trans. I am being misgendered. I'm being dead named at this point. And he's telling me while he's doing this that none of the stuff that I'm talking about matters, even though he ignores everything else that I write and he fixates on the one vote issue of a culture war. And I'm being called the special snowflake by the person who's insisting that everything's bullshit and dead naming me and all of that. Again, it's Gamergate all over again. I've only read this article and I claim him a jackass. January 2024, 2023. I like how Nick hasn't responded. Shows how they don't have an argument to fight back with. If Nick responded to this, please show me, because I'm dying to see what bull they pulled up to fight back with. At this point, I was in the middle of writing my book series and was working on it pretty steadily at this point. So sex positivity was already on my blog since January 2022, and at this point, I was well in the middle of doing that, so I actually had better things to do at that point in time. Still being dead named, how would you know the assignment of the characters? Yeah, that's technically true. I would say that Dr. Elena Richardson, if she goes into the closet and is worshiping Doom Guy as a god, I would hazard to guess that they're straight, but I don't know that for sure. But also, by that logic, Doom Guy could be super gay. But the point being is that the entire argument pushes things into a binarized hierarchy that favors the visual components. He's white and he's male. And nobody mentions gender at all. So this isn't even an argument that they take seriously or entertain. You just see people in their final masculine feminine forms present within the game. Yeah, because that's largely how they present. Additionally, there are more female NPCs present than you've chosen to ignore during cutscenes. during the Doomslayers interacting with humans. Yeah, and they're so forgettable, they're literally tableau. They're window dressing. They have no dialogue, or if they do, it's ooh-woo. Look at this strong, sexy man. The overwhelming majority of the cutscenes consist of interaction with non-human characters, and it would be shameful to think you just automatically assume their gender. I don't assume anyone's gender, but I can tell if something's being transphobic. It's pretty fucking obvious. Stay mad, July 18th, 2024. Imagine getting absolutely dogpiled, and not a single person helps. Yeah, actually, that really fucking sucks. I really, really didn't like that. So this person's acknowledging that I'm getting dogpiled, and he's laughing that it's a witch hunt. Trove, January 8th, 2022. You know that even if you're not a guy, you can still play Doom Eternal. Yes, because I'm not a guy. I'm a trans woman. It's not like you have to show your ID and prove that you're male. I agree. I Love Lean, February 25th. I don't know what that is. Oh no, Doom Guy's not a female. That totally makes the game transphobic and hate women. Anyone can enjoy this game. Yes, it's true, but we can also critique it. Stop worrying about something irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. It's very important to me. Like, it's something that pertains to me getting attacked. It's literally a witch hunt happening right now. So to call it irrelevant doesn't make any sense because it's literally unfolding before you, and you're gaslighting me as I'm being attacked. Like, it's not irrelevant. It's irrelevant to you because it's not affecting you. You're literally an innocent bystander who's being passive-aggressive towards me in the middle of a witch hunt. And trying to add something that would just make no sense and harm the game to new and old players specifically. So if they added these things, it would be a problem? How? It would conflict with the fascist worldview, absolutely, but that's a good thing. But Doom wasn't doing that, so you're only adding to my argument. Unknown, people like you are the reason game journalism exists. Okay, yeah, sure. Gamergate. March 1st, 2022. Hi, avid Doom fan here. I was wanting to give my own 2 cents on this. So to start off with things I agree with, yes, Tag 1 and 2 felt rushed, especially 2. Microsoft's purchase of id Software and Bethesda really screwed over production for Tag 2, and I think they could have done better. I also think the Sentinel Hammer makes it a bit too easy for Tag 2, being someone who has played the entire game and DLC multiple times. So this is the first person out of all these comments so far who's actually mentioned that. Thank you for mentioning that. Now on the things I respectfully disagree with. Okay, let's hear it. 1. My man, Nick Buddy. Okay, so I hadn't come out of the closet at this time, so I'll let it slide. Old pal, Doom Eternal is simply a game about killing demons and saving humanity. Was it really? Was Aliens just about killing bugs and saving humanity, or is there allegory? The only damsel in distress is every other human on Earth. Yes, I would agree. That is absolutely 100% true. It's a one-man army saving the entire world from the bad guys. Just like the Power Rangers, just like Mega Man, any hero that you could think of. From the thousands of heroes, Joseph Campbell, A Hero with a Thousand Faces, from 1949, addressed this quite thoroughly. This is a very old thing. Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, and in that, Lucas is kind of making fun of the monomyth by saying into the garbage chute flyboy, but also telling Carrie Fisher there's no underwear in space, so it's not perfect by any means. It's still a bit sexist, but you're right, yes. The entire Earth, Mother Earth, is being protected by evil, degenerate forces. I would agree. 2. The Doomslayer is supposed to be an unstoppable force of nature in his universe. Yes. So it would be somewhat make sense to have his physique be based off of Conan or Rambo or Terminator. Yes. I can understand the bit of disgust as muscles are not made for everyone. However, to say that his design is sexist and transphobic is just pure malarkey at this point. It's not, though, because you're taking a specific heroic image, the same idea as Captain America, who is sexist and racist, or Conan the Barbarian, who is sexist and racist, and they're literally following in their footsteps to make the same kind of arguments. It's not pure malarkey, you're just ignoring the history of it. Go and read Rob Howard. Go and read Captain America. Watch The Boys. Or watch any of the skits where they talk about how Captain America is racist. And they have that character who's Homelander's precursor. So Homelander's the fascist Superman. And I forget the guy's name, but the dude with the shield. And he's basically a sexist Captain America. It's not malarkey. Would you say The Boys is malarkey? Because it was written by a bunch of straight dudes ostensibly. No, it's the same exact argument, but I'm being invalidated because you don't agree with the premise that like tokenization can happen or that the past wasn't racist. It absolutely was racist and transphobic. And trans people existed before 1965, 1933, with the burning of the Institute of Sexology at Magnus Hirschfeld's place of work and the burning of a lot of those books. That was all to destroy trans research, gender affirming care. And when you erase history, you're a Nazi. So even though you're a little bit more polite, you're writing from anonymity though, because it says you're unknown, you're still making the same arguments. You're still gaslighting me. And that's annoying. 3, saying that the game is sexist and transphobic because there is no representation of trans people, or because the only female character are Conmaker and the Doctor, is just grasping for straws now. Is it really? It's like, where are all the people of color? If you watch Leave It to Beaver, and they don't have any black people in that show, it's still sexist. It's still a conservative-minded show that was made during the civil rights movement to ignore anything but white people. It's called a lie of omission. That's not grasping at straws because, as you just pointed out, there are basically no characters at all except for the Conmaker and the Doctor. Their only purpose is to be waifu bait and to be destroyed. The virgin and the whore. That's incredibly sexist and racist. A game purely about slaying demons, left and right, does not need a strong female character or a trans character so the LGBTQ community gets recognition. Really? So you're a cishet, straight person, white person who's saying we don't need these things because we have a white hero? That's literally a white savior argument, which, by the way, is fascist. So you're basically doing the white moderacy thing. You're kind of poo-pooing everything that I'm saying. And I'm saying, go fuck yourself. Now, I understand everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and I respect that, so I won't say that it is wrong. Thank you. However, I am allowed to disagree with it. Okay, then I can disagree with you too. I post this in the hopes that we can respect each other's opinions. Like, you're gaslighting me, and you're being a white moderate, so no, I'm not going to be polite, especially with what's going on, and Trump just got elected again, because Biden was fascist, Obama was fascist, and basically every president in United States history was fascist. So, yeah, no. I'm not going to respect your opinion. I'm not going to be polite. We have to speak out and be rude and ruffle some feathers of those poor, white, fragile male gamers and token people. 5/2022, trans person here. Please shut up and let me give demons in peace. Go fuck yourself, token traitor. Trans people as well, shut the fuck up. I love this game, no one cares. Well, actually, no. I know plenty of people who care, and I've had people reach out who care, and there are plenty of other trans people besides you, and just because you sell out and just keep your head down and play the game and don't say anything doesn't mean that other people can't speak out. You're basically the Jew at the Warsaw Ghetto who keeps quiet instead of fighting back. They're going to kill us either way, but I'd rather fight back than keep quiet. March 7, 2022, you do realize anyone can play Doom. The game has followed the same formula since the 90s. Kill demons, save Earth. That's not just for men. Hell, my ex who transitioned from female to male actually loves Doom. This article is just a hate on men. Like, I transitioned, okay, so your ex, key word there is a trans man. Okay, well, I'm a trans woman. And I love Doom. I love the nostalgia. I love the music. I love a lot of things about it. But I can still critique it. And I'm critiquing Nazis who aren't just men, but also tokenized women and tokenized marginalized groups besides women, from people of color to trans people to Jewish people to any minority that you could think of, from ethnicity, sex, gender, disabled people. It doesn't matter. Tokenization is tokenization. Betrayal is betrayal. And a bigotry for one is a bigotry for all. P.S. With the lore, Doom guy lost his wife and son. Yes, and he had a pet rabbit. I'm familiar with all that. So it's an act of revenge. It's a revenge killing, an honor killing, very similar to Ellen Ripley. She has an act of revenge. She lost her daughter. This time it's personal. Yeah, so that's not a good argument for your sake. That's literally the backstabbing Jew argument that Nazis used. It's the degenerates. It's gay people. It's black people. It's women. They pointed the finger at everyone. They targeted Jews predominantly, but they also focused on other groups too. You're making the same exact argument basically a century later, right before the beer hall push, actually. So more than a century later, you're making the same exact arguments. Let's see, March. So we're only through the first year of the comments at this point. So 2022. Its target community is effectively an all-boys club filled to capacity with men who loved Doom 3 in the good old days. Yep. Doom Eternal's target community is fans of the original. Oh my god, I can't believe it. Yeah, I'm a fan of the original too. So where's the argument there? March 7, 2022. This bitch is the most dumb person I have ever heard. It's a game about killing demons. And the last time I checked when I booted up the game, it didn't ask if I was male or female. And this is the guy getting mad at that one game. It wasn't Star Trek, but it was some kind of like mass generated world building game. It was basically Fallout in space, and the guy got mad when they were asking for someone's gender. So this is the kind of stuff. It's like, how dare they ask our gender? But you have a gender is the thing, and there are more than two, but they get like really fucking angry about that kind of stuff. March 16, 2022, this game is a power grab as a character made in the 90s as a male. It actually goes back further than that because it's based off Conan and other characters before that, all the way to Satan and Paradise Lost, all the way back to Beowulf. So, but they're following a trend that's sexist instead of like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is critiquing all of that. You can't just change him into a woman. Yes, you can. What do you think Ripley was? Or Samus Aran? Or any other character, because Red Sonja, you absolutely can. March 17, 2022, possibly the most cringe blog article I've ever seen with my eyes. Clown. 18th, 2022, exactly. March 22nd, 2022. So basically, I'm getting hate posts every day for like an entire year at this point. Honestly, I find this criticism approach quite intriguing. I don't really think much should be done, as this particular instance is nothing major aside from adding a gender toggle. It doesn't even have to change the model, but that would have been a good bit of effort some may like, but nevertheless, I could see it sparking a greater discussion about sexualization and the likes, but that may exemplify the character, and so on and so forth. Yeah, why not? What's it going to hurt, aside from exposing a lot of these issues? But they didn't want to do that because they were pandering to white straight men, and their fans were policing that for them. And speedrunners that I worked with turned a blind eye to all of this. Basically, yeah, it's for fans of the original, and it does shape the production in some bad ways. I agree, but that does not mean that much should be done about it. Why not? Especially with the ability to make one's own courses and modifications. Yeah, I would agree that fans can do stuff and make Doom more sex positive and towards universal liberation. You're absolutely right about that. And expecting a company to do that is a big ask because they're a bunch of sexist, white, straight nerds. And that's been true since the 90s. From Bill Gates to John Romero to Richard Gobile to Nick Newhard, they were all sexist. And play Duke Nukem, for Christ's sakes, or the Shadow Warrior. Like, the best example of a game that's not as sexist is Blood, and it still has problems. March 29th, 2022. Hey, guess what? In the Doom lore, a female character named Crash taught him everything he knows and trained him. So there you go. A woman that's got to be almost to maybe even more powerful than the Doomslayer himself. Yeah, and I would have really liked that. And Arlene Sanders from the paperback novels, where she's like strong and sexy, and they, it's like, ooh, yeah, and they kill demons together. Why couldn't it be a Bonnie and Clyde situation? I want my little hot waifu. Why not? Okay, you can pander to me. I'm not above having my sexual needs met through games. But they don't do that. They omit Crash, they omit Arlene Sanders, and those are problematic characters unto themselves. But it's basically the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3, where Solid Snake was taught by a woman. Yeah, no, that's totally true. And, that's a problematic character too, and it's original sin, and Snake, and Eve, and Adam, and all of that kind of stuff, But, if Metal Gear Solid can do that, then why not Doom? There's a reason, April 3rd, 2022, there's a reason why game journalism is getting clowned on, and this perfectly demonstrates that. Okay, Mad Titan, April 9th, 2022. Guys, it's an April Fool's joke from 2020. Chill. So this person thought it was a joke. It actually wasn't. April 14th, 2022. This guy has single-handedly created the best April Fool's joke that completely blew out of proportion. It wasn't a joke, though. I was actually being serious. April 17th. But it's a valid point, is that a lot of people, this is how I know they're bad faith, because they could have just said it's a joke because April Fools, but they chose to attack me anyways. It shows their intent. These people aren't joking. They're like, huh, shut up, faggot. Where's the joke? April 17th, 2022. Okay, wait, if this is an April Fool's joke, this is the funniest shit ever. Why did you put so much effort to get people mad? To wake them up. To open their minds. That's the joke. Is that Doom is fascist. For real. June 9th, 2022. At this point, I'd come out as trans. This so-called insight is more fictitious than the game itself. The Doom franchise consists of a male warrior hell-bent on cleansing the world of a demonic presence, a zombie apocalypse. In other words, that is all. Well, that is all. It's still a zombie apocalypse, which targeted different activists during the Vietnam War, which is what this is riffing off of. So it's not just anything. To criticize a game based on a notion that it doesn't fit within current life rhetorics, including the writer's own personal beliefs, which I think has more to do with a response to an ego knock. Oh darn, I critiqued your heroes. Whatever shall they do? Are you going to defend their honor for them? How nice of you. Immediately tells me that someone came across the video game, disagreed with its core foundation, yes, and then proceeded to write a piece to justify how it's not woke enough to incorporate the world we live in today. Yeah, and I like the game. It's like I interviewed speedrunners about this game, and I followed it for over 2 years before backing away and after getting dogpiled like this. I liked the game, but I also critiqued it, and you're acting like those are mutually exclusive. They're not. And it's like being woke is to point out people who are going to attack us for the state. Police violence is stochastic in nature as well as official. And you're telling me that I should keep quiet. And that's absolutely not within my best interests. I don't care if you like me or not. I'm going to speak out about genocide, which includes witch hunts like this, telling people to be quiet. And you know what says that? That tells me that the writer is consciously trying to justify that there is no place in today's world for games such as Doom anymore because it does not fit within a movement that upheld by a minority. The game needs to change. Yeah, it needs to be subverted. Yes, I agree. Taking the aforementioned into account, we can see that this tactic not only drives down the creativity and versatility of future game developers, because making things more subversive and inclusive is a bad thing, is what you're arguing. Because if you don't pander to the status quo, then it's not innovative. That's pandering to the status quo is the opposite of innovation. It's stagnant. That's what fascism is. But also creates a space in which people do not feel free to express their individuality. That's literally what I'm doing. Your individuality should be able to coexist with mine, but you're acting like they're mutually exclusive. So there's a double standard here, and you're applying it to yourself. And do you know how certain movements came about in the world over the last while? By people expressing their individuality. Yeah, I agree, and that's what I'm doing. Whether the majority or others agree with certain notions or not is irrelevant. There will always be a like or dislike towards certain topics and ideas. Okay, so what's the problem? I think the silent majority can handle little old me writing a review about their game. The point is that the writer of this article fails to see this conundrum. By this definition, this article is extremely callow and borderline narcissistic. Okay, so, they're just saying that, according to their own double standard, I don't have value. And they're the one who's acting like they can't handle my opinion. Because I kept working on this for years. Like, I never stopped. Taking the aforementioned, imagine a person plays Fallout 3 for the first time. And in their mind, they are more favorable to a certain character that cannot be created in the customizer player model menu. That's what I did. Yes, I played that game and I modified it. And I played as a woman. Does this mean they have the right to write an article about a certain game does not conform to their standards? Yes. Will this article be deemed basically null and void by the vast majority? Of course, because it's clutching at straws to justify the thoughts of one person. No, it's tied to a larger group. You're dividing and conquering us. You're dividing trans people and saying that it's just the voice of one person. It's just the the mad woman in the attic, when in reality, I speak for a larger group of people. Even if there are token people who punch down against me during marginalized infighting, I'm not just the voice of one person. I'm not just a bad apple. It's like, no, I represent a larger group. That's the whole point of becoming an authority, is so that I can speak out about larger issues like this relative to the group to which I belong. Listen, OP, you need to remember that diversification is a real thing, and will continue to be so for a long time, hopefully forever, because a video game or movie or series does not take note of current life transformations or conditions, and is created based on unique ideas and theories by developers and writers, does not mean it is hateful or biased towards any other members of society unless intended, though a certain degree of respectfulness should still hold a standard. So I'm being tone policed by a white moderate, basically. Doom stands as it is, and it will not change. Okay, so you're arguing for it not to be diverse, basically. You're arguing for it to stay the same old white guy saves the world violence, and that's inherently regressive and conservative. So you're policing what you deem is your territory. This was yours before it was mine, and ergo, I'm not allowed to say anything. Disagree with the above. Pity, that's the cost of individualism, friend. No, I can disagree with you and just get on with my life. Okay, fuck you. I disagree with you, Nazi. And I'm going to move on. Chuck Migback, August 7th, 2022, the day I came out as trans. See, the point of Doom Eternal and the entire Doom series is to rip and tear every demon you see. It's supposed to be fun. Its software doesn't need to put in female characters or trans characters to make a good game, as long as it's enjoyable and even memorable. Well, yeah, but the game is pretty open with its dog whistles. And if you had a game where you're playing a straight guy, it's like, yeah, I can watch Rocky Horror and still get a laugh about Janet and Brad and all of that. It's funny, but I'd rather watch Nimona, which actually talks about being trans and our struggles. Similar games like Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead are about killing zombies and surviving. They don't need to put in trans people, Asians, Mexicans, or black people. It's about killing zombies with the weapons provided in the entertainment. So you're saying that games are just entertainment, no politics. You can just have white people. But yeah, but what if we want more than just white people? What you're arguing for is for them not to do it because they don't have to, according to you. I'm saying, and according for us to survive, they have to do it. Because if we don't, they'll kill us, because that's what fascists do. When capital decays, there will be real-life zombie apocalypses and real-life doom guys going around with their giant fucking trucks and their bulletproof armor and their AR-15s and shooting us. Which happens. And not just trans people, but also the Asian massage parlors and black communities, which are being policed all the time. This is called stochastic terrorism. So yes, we do have to speak out about this stuff because it's bred in environments like this. So anyone who tells you not to talk about genocide, regardless of where it occurs, propaganda is propaganda, and you need to critique it to change it. And anyone who says it needs to not change is a Nazi. And if they're a white moderate, then they're just an American liberal who decays into a Nazi, which is exactly what happened with this most recent election. Rat, August 17, 2022, while you are blinded as Nick on this concept and the story that Doom is trying to tell. September 19, 2022, the group of people you're trying to white knight for, that I'm actually speaking for because I'm trans, and at this point I'd actually come out as trans, so on the same blog I would add, so they're saying that they don't share the same sentiment, so because there's some token trans people, ergo all trans people think like that. There's so much gaslighting going on here. It's gross. December 16, 2022, I've never seen nor heard such bullshit in my time in the gaming community. All of the removed replies says it all. December 24th, 2022, probably one of the most ridiculous displays of ineptitude in video game discussions to date. You clearly have no idea what you're talking about. I would advise you shut the fuck up and stop making yourself look like such an idiot. You single-handedly made the most moronic statements of opinion one can make by trying to paint this game in such a light and making it appear significantly more complicated than it needs to be. Okay, just more bigotry. January 4th, 2023, honestly didn't have to laugh so hard in a long time. I showed this to my trans, straight, gay, bi, pan friends, and we are all having a hell of a time discussing how you got those conclusions in fan art. Like, damn, didn't think that human stupidity has fallen that deep. January 4th, 2023. The fact that your whole website is just fucking nudes does not improve your fucking point. You fucking moron. Just delete the whole blog and post. Hey, Fallen Aegis, maybe you should delete yourself and profile and go get a real life. Bro, why the hell are you so brain dead to type that? Same reason goes for most of your responses to these replies. I guess Rex Lancer was actually one person in like this whole group who's kind of come back repeatedly. I don't know who they are outside of this, but so there was a bit of dissenting opinion, which is nice. But also, this comment has been removed by the author. Apparently, I deleted by the author, so I didn't remove this. They did. I don't know why. And they said, well, I guess haters are going to hate, but who cares about their inaccurate and immature opinions? Yeah, absolutely. This was a fascinating article you wrote here. The title was a bit odd at first, but I understand what you were trying to state throughout the article. You explained in depth and constructed an excellent statement of inequality in modern gaming. It was a brilliant statement. Good luck on your future endeavors. Cheers. So yeah, thanks. So out of like the 50 plus comments that I've read so far, this is the one overtly positive one that I got so far. I'm not saying you have to be strictly like effusive and suck my dick, though if you want to, I'm not going to complain. But this is like the first one. And then right after that, someone responds, trans person here, please shut the fuck up and stop being overly woke. This game is about fucking around, killing demons, and saving humanity. The only human in the game that you actively interact with is fucking Doom Guy. Shit like this is why game journalism is dying. Seriously, you should be in the Olympics for how great you are at jumping to conclusions. Just noted the post date. If this is an April Fool's joke, you got me good. So they're like, I fucking hate you, and I'm gonna kill you, and I'm a trans person, and fuck you, and I'm ignoring the ear trans too. Oh, ha, April Fool's, good one, bro. Like, God, these people are crazy. Hello, March 1st, 2023. Oh my fucking God, there are people saying there's so much sexuality in games. Then there's people saying there's too little. What is fucking wrong with you feminists now? Seriously, Wollstonecraft would be fucking disappointed by people like you. Really? 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 Okay, whatever. I'm not even going to entertain that one. March 4th, 2023. Now, I may not have a master's in anything, but I'd like to counter that at least one particular point made in this review, that it somehow supports traditional gender roles because Doom Eternal has so few female representation, and of the actions mindset of the one NPC. Well, what about the new Wolfenstein games? What about them? It's a different game. Concurrent with titles like Doom and Doom Eternal, we had the New Order, Old Blood, New Colossus, Youngblood, etc., published via Machine Games under its software licensing. These games were replete with female characters, both villainous and heroic, with fleshed-out backstories, and capable of defending themselves and fighting for their own survival and worldviews. In Youngblood, you also have not one but two playable female protagonists, who are the daughters of BJ and Anna, who are just as capable as their dear old dad at rendering the ultraviolence upon their foes. Yeah, and that's a good thing, right? Don't you want more of that? I do. I'm a trans person. I want to kill Nazis. Can I kill Nazis? Please, please. As a trans person, though. So I think that the original point that it is for traditional gender roles because Doom is not very accurate due to the presented evidence. Or they made one game that's sexist and another series that's made by a different department, a different group of people made that game. So, wow, one team of developers is more sexist than another. That's totally possible. Two things can be true at the same time. Graft Ho, April 3rd, 2023. I hope it's an April Fool's. It's not. John, July 18th, 2023. You're taking this game and trying to force it into one or the other in a debate it doesn't take part in. Everyone takes part in a debate. Even if you choose not to take part in the debate while the debate's going on, you're still taking part. Frederick, July 20th, 2023. It is a pretty bold accusation to throw around that a game is sexist. How? And your argument does not support that claim. How? This review is a cheap shot for clicks. It is rage bait, and you know it. Actually, I didn't actually want people to respond this way, but they did, which proves my argument right because all of these people are like, actually, you're wrong, and now I'm going to be transphobic towards you and talk down to you and virtue signal, guess like Gatekeep Girl Boss, all of that. So yeah, it's like, I wasn't actually expecting people to respond as negatively as they did, but they did. This is the modern manifestation of angsty and edgy. I am apparently arrogant, narcissistic, snarky, and without value. Shit. Some dude, November 15, 2023. This comment was removed by the author. This comment was not removed by the author, however. No girls or trans people allowed. In these latter days of nostalgia mania, Doom Eternal shamelessly panders to an older audience. Oh, so does that mean they should pander to you and your own degenerate, dog whistle, ideologies? Bitch, please. Why would a game promote the same ideologies that are responsible for enabling rapists from entering bathrooms to target innocent children and the butchering of children in hospitals? You are either dumb or stupid. So, okay, the turf argument. Vincent Grimley, December 13th, 2023. Stupidest article I've read in years. Gatto, January 6th, 2024. What the fuck did I just read? January 27th, 2024. You dumb bitch. You are honestly a waste of human breath. You are worthless like a fucking ant. You literally use meds that other people could use. You should kill yourself now. So I'm a useless eater, basically. And this guy's name is Death Corp of Krieg. So a Nazi. Okay. First is Death Corpse of Krieg, so you spelled that wrong. Second, you need to chill the fuck out, bro. Posted on April 1st, 2020. Sylvia, last name. June 12th, 2024. This article is an immensely interesting read, the contents of which I have yet to fully come to conclusions on. Whether or not I agree or disagree with you in the future, I love reading things outside the status quo, and the endless glazing of Doom Eternal meant there was really no discussion of the game's negatives. Exactly. Especially not in this way. I always appreciate someone saying something different to everyone else, both for the novel perspectives it provides and the breath of fresh air appearing a unique opinion. Good job in saying something unique and really upsetting a lot of people who clearly never actually had anything important to worry about. Have a great day. Stay classy. Stay mad, July 18th, 2024. Bro, got absolutely dogged. Everyone forgot this was an April Fool's joke, I hope. People genuinely support this? Really? Yeah, because guess what? There is more between heaven and hell than is dreamt of in your philosophy. The Muffin Man. You are really clueless, Nick. August 9th, 2024. Damn it! Not the Muffin Man! Slayer. September 4th, 2024. It's funny how absolutely wrong this post is. You say there should be more females in games like Doom, but then also say that the women that actually are in it, or when they do put women in it, that they are over-sexualized, which is entirely wrong. There are numerous female characters who aren't sexualized, only by the fans they are. Then you also say that there should be a Doom Girl variant, so that you have the option. The first Doom was made in 1993. It told the player that Doom Guy lost his wife, child, and pet, and that's the reason why he's fighting the legions of hell. Notice how the reason he's fighting isn't because he's a man. Yeah, it is. He's literally being a man to avenge his wife. It's literally avenging the nuclear family against nature as degenerate. Now fast forward to 2023, 2024, he's still up and kicking. To really believe that they should suddenly change the character to a girl? Sure, why not? Even as a variant? Sure, why not? Back when it was usually men being the heroes and MCs, what about Ellen Ripley, Samus Aran? But a franchise of games isn't going to change with the times just because some people complain about it. What do you think happened with Metroid? In fact, it's really only you complaining about it. I know gay and trans people who have zero problem with Doom and its story. Okay, and guess what? They're bigoted. But there's always one hater. There's more than me. I'm writing for other people. The craziest thing about this, though, is that all the comments on this blog are all deleted. No, they're not, because I just read through a bunch of them, which is insane for someone trying to force an opinion, but doesn't want to hear other ones. No, I'm responding to these, and I'm only responding to this now because, well, since 2022, I've written 4 books going on 5, and then I have a 6th one coming out after that. So I've been kind of busy, and I only just got around to responding to this now because, yeah, honestly, it was hurtful. I was coming out of the closet, and I was still trying to understand a lot of this stuff. So I'm sorry I didn't respond to it instantly. 1, 2, 3, come on, faster, respond to us right now, notice me. I'm like, no, I'll get around to it when I get around to it. Too long, don't read. Doom isn't sexist or transphobic. Doom Guy isn't fighting because he's a man. And the games aren't going to add a Doom Girl because you complained about it. Nick's Movie Insights. You realize, and this is me responding to this today, January 15th, 2025. You realize I'm a trans woman, right? I was trans and I wrote this. I was writing about myself in the closet. That's true regardless if you have token trans friends or not. And it's true for you and them to be transphobic because, in my professional opinion, someone with her PhD in liberating sex work through Gothic poetics, and as a regular trans woman, you're both being bigoted. You as a garden variety cishet guy, and them as bog standard tokens. All of that is true now that I'm out of the closet, too. So there you go. All of these comments spanning for 4 years, basically. Scrolling, were in response to this article, especially after I started writing about postcolonialism and doom, and I started critiquing it, despite the fact that I was trying to say positive things about the game, and I was trying to, do all of that. Nobody cared about any of that. They only cared about that I was critiquing the status quo that the game represented. And them policing that status quo is demonstrated through them going after my review. And they did this for years. And I was stalked outside of this blog and told to kill myself, and that I was gay, and that I liked porn, even though by the time I was being told a lot of that stuff, I was already out and I had a website that was dedicated to porn. And actually, when I wrote this, I had a website that was dedicated to erotic art. And specifically, originally the tagline was a website for strong women and soft boys, because I used to do fan art for The Legend of Zelda and, fan fiction. And then it became a place for queer expression in the Gothic imagination. But Vanderwaard art came out before this, so it's like I was always out in regards to my politics, and I had dated a non-binary person and a gender fluid person, and now another non-binary person. And I learned a lot from these people. And I also learned that, hey, I'm actually not straight. I've been trans, and I've always been trans ever since I was small. And in any event, so this piece is the piece that kind of started all of that, and it had to do with the work that I researched after this when I started looking into Metroidvania, and then I wrote my sex positivity series. I started doing that, and then I came out like a week later, and then from there I ended up writing multiple books, and I wrote about shooters too, and I wrote about speedrunning too, and I wrote about Doom too, and I wrote about Metroid and Castlevania and a lot of other stories. So yeah, this is obviously very important to my work, but a huge motivating factor, and one that I really didn't talk about nearly enough. In this piece, Those Who Walk Away from Speedrunning, I talked about some of the abuse that I suffered, and I had wrote about the debut for my Metroidvania Corpus. I didn't talk about why I left speedrunning, and then I talked about why I left speedrunning. And then after that, I'm like, as I'm going backwards and remembering all of this, I remembered Doom Eternal 2020 review, No Girls or Trans People Allowed. I'm like, this encompasses a lot of the abuse that I was experiencing. And this is something that a lot of people in the shooter community turned a blind eye to. This is when I got gaslit. This is when I got shut out. This is when trans emasculation was happening to me. And it only determined me to keep writing. But a lot of the interviews, a lot of the things that I had planned, I was going to interview Richard Gobile, I was going to interview Nick Newhard. These were both famous game developers. They saw what was happening and decided, hey, you know what? We're just never going to respond to you again. And Richard Gobile was someone who had open scandals against him, and Nick Newhard was someone who I was asking questions about his game politically. And compared to the original review that he did, the interview series that he did with Ragnar Rocks in 2020, the same year that I wrote this, that review was much more effusive. It was much more cishet. It was much more about the glory days, whereas I wanted to think about things a little bit more politically too. Not entirely, but they acted like it was cyanide in their pudding, and that if they accepted anything from me at all, it would somehow taint them or make them degenerate. That's what happened with Nick Newhard. That's what happened with Richard Gobile. That's what happened with John Romero and other people that I was trying to interview. It happened with speedrunners. And then all of these people are just another part of that. And it took forever to talk about because there was a lot of it. This happened for years. I was getting dogpiled, not just here, but on Twitter multiple times. Someone reached out to me in good faith or in bad faith and tried to basically get me to transvestigate my own partner. And they were a trans person too. Like, so there's some really fucked up shit happening. So to say that none of this matters, that none of this is connected, when that person who was attacking me was a huge fan of Ghostbusters, was a huge fan of Doom and Predator and all of these things. And they were basically doing the same thing. Don't critique this stuff. And not only that, they tried to get my work discredited. And they went to all the sex workers that I worked with and told them that I'm a crazy trans person, even though they're a trans person. So this kind of shit has hounded me for years, when the original review isn't even that radical, like this review of Doom Eternal. But then also this particular post here, if we scroll down, all of this stuff, when we get down to Postcolonialism in Doom, this original post in 2020, so these two posts are only a couple months apart, and so all of this was a consequence of me starting to talk about this, and the proof is in the pudding. These people for this review here absolutely ate me alive and still continued to discredit me. But now that I'm actually much more cemented in my work, and like they realize, okay, they're not just talking to anyone, but I'm a journalist and I'm trans and I'm a doctor, they don't nearly fuck with me nearly as much. Like, I'm sure there's going to be people who walk up to me. Yeah, I get fucked with all the time, but definitely the stuff like this has kind of died down. But I fully expect in the days ahead that it's going to kick up again, especially after I release this. All right, so in conclusion, that's everything about the abuse that I suffered writing about speedrunners. This took forever to do, but there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. I hope that you found the original writing interesting, its connection to the other work that I do. There's plenty of stuff to check out on my old blog, which by and large is safe for work, so you should be able to go in, and if you want to read about my interviews with speedrunners, including people who play Doom or Metroid or other games besides, there's all kinds of stuff like that that's fun. If you just like video games and game theory, there's shit like that for you. But if you want to find out what it was like for me to be a trans person in and out of academia who was being dogpiled by transphobic people, cishet or not, there's a lot of information there too. So this wraps up this episode of Doom is something that I'm talking about vis-a-vis my Metroidvania research. So that this is the end of episode 6 of my Metroidvania YouTube series. After this, I'm going to try and read some more posts that I wrote back in the day and just kind of talk about them and think about them a little bit for fun. And we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, if you liked what I wrote and you want to see more stuff beyond just what I've written, but you maybe want to know my opinion about something else, let me know. And I like feedback and stuff like that. If you do something bigoted, I'm not going to respond to it. Or if I do, I'll just be like, okay, well, you're a bigot, and move on at this point. And but otherwise, like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more stuff. I'm releasing the last 2 books in my series on Valentine's Day. And in the meantime, I'll be releasing videos like this every so often. And until then, stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and take care.